That doesn't mean we can't stop the chat, but I just wanted to let you know before I started recording that I am. So
This is where we get really self-conscious.
No, nobody actually looks at these. They're all here for archival purposes and for the inevitable presentation proposal. Which this week I'm hopefully finishing up a presentation proposal. Kim, are you on the call later with Becky?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll be on there for that. I mentioned this before, but there's another book club, and I'm hoping that we can prepare something collaboratively to present at ISTE. I already reached out to Becky and Mike to see if they wanted to join forces on a best practices in online book clubs proposal. So we're going to see. We're going to talk about it later today, but that's due by Friday. So
I know.
God, ISTE proposals are so early.
But you should see Q. We have spring and fall Q.
Right.
And to apply, it's like 10 and a half months before the event. It's crazy. Technology changes too much to be able to commit to something like that. Anyway, sorry.
Anyway. Okay, so this was a different kind of week for us because we had the Flipgrid that everybody had to that everybody was posting to. I'm going to pull it up just so later on I can see what everybody's values were and whether they want to speak to them. But how did people feel about the most recent chapter of Dare to Lead?
I loved this chapter so much. This one spoke to me so much more than the one comparing like the armored versus the daring leadership. And I think that it was just our organization has done a initiative, I guess, for the past year on feedback. And I've told so many people these 5 pages and Brené's items, 10 things about feedback, gave me more than a whole year and 2 other books on thanks for the feedback. So I just loved everything about figuring out values. And I'm so envious of you all who already have your values figured out and you already have these great thoughts about the values. But I'm still working on deciding. I've got too many. Trying to narrow it down to 2 is just it's a challenge. So yeah, I loved this chapter.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't have my values figured out. That's for sure. I just had to, for the purpose of the discussion, I was looking to kind of try and clarify my values. I would love to say that in a year's time, I'm going to be in the same place, but I have no idea. Did anybody else feel that way when they were doing it?
I knew right away. I did a leading edge certification a couple of years ago, and there was an exercise similar. And I knew that service was definitely something that just guided me wherever I went, whether it was personally or at work. I knew service was, but it was the second one that I really couldn't commit to right away. That was harder for me. And she's right. There's like 15 or 20. She said most people choose 10 to 15 values that really speak to them, and there were. And how do you leave off family, or how do you leave off joy? Like it's almost like I can't make you second tier, but I liked how I was looking for the quote because she phrased it really cool about how she whittled it down to hers, and I just that was tough. The second one was tough. First one was easy.
I really had to spend a lot of time like analyzing it, like some of them fold into the others for me. And so that I just really, the way that I kind of narrowed it down was making sure that what did I really mean by this? And that really actually when I say this word, that actually includes this also. So that it took me a while, but I did exactly what she said would happen. And before I read that part, like I stopped at the values and did my list. And then I read on, and she was describing how people typically choose, 10 to 15 or whatever it was. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I did. So I fell right into that.
What were your 2?
Mine are creativity and legacy.
Oh, I like legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I wanted to ask you about legacy.
Yeah.
I
So-
added a comment on yours that I wanted to dig into legacy a little bit, and I'll put you on the spot because you were
That's
one of the
fine.
organizers. So
Well, and that was what, I mean, I did as I was making notes and as I was narrowing it down, I actually, would cross off one and write it next to legacy or next to, something else. So with legacy, when I look at the other words that I had, like I think it was impact and family and making a difference, all of those to me fell into that legacy category. So I could actually unfold all of that because all of those things to me were encompassed by that one word, legacy. So yeah, that making a difference, impact with my work and with everything, everything that I'm about as a coach is about making an impact on others and then them making an impact on their students and all of that. And then family, raising my son to be the kind of person that has, integrity and is kind and all of those things. That's legacy to me.
Yeah. Good.
that's so interesting because my first take on legacy, and I'm wondering if this is, a guy thing, but my first take on legacy was that was about me and not about what
Others.
I was leaving behind and what others were doing. I looked at legacy and I was like, and that was why I questioned it, because I was like, you and I must be thinking about this completely differently, because that's not, what you just said about legacy makes perfect sense. But in my head, it was the wrong take.
I think that's why it's so neat to go through that process and narrow it down, because you do, it's very personal when you do that. And with creativity, my creativity one includes vision and wisdom and growth, all those other words that I had are part of my creative process, I guess. So, yeah.
That's just
for
so
somebody
cool.
else, it's going to mean something different.
Well, Jenny, I love that you wrote the words next to each other to try to come up with how does one fold into the other. And I said in my little Flipgrid video, I went and looked up definitions and etymology of everything. And so maybe writing the words next to each other, that's what I need to do next to be able to narrow things down. I love that.
It was definitely a challenge to narrow it down, because I came up with exactly the same kind of thing that she was saying. I have a list of, here's all of my words, on a big old Post-it, and I ended up on a first pass, I ended up with, what is that? That's 20 words when I made the first pass. And that's like, okay, how do I get from 20 down? And even as I was making the Flipgrid video, and I was talking about my two, creativity and growth, as I was talking about creativity, I started talking about growth. I hadn't intended to talk about them together, but I was talking about creative ways to inspire growth. And suddenly there I was on the same thing. So I think they all wend together in some way, depending upon who you are as a person, but you find a way that they all kind of tie together. But for me, what was very interesting about it was, and it was something that Catherine was talking about it. Was it were you talking about organizational vision? Or was it, no, Emily was talking about organizational vision. And now I don't remember who it was.
Our organization as a whole, yes. Our
yes,
mission
that's
was
right.
Student Service Solutions, yes, is our, or yes, I see, yeah.
Right. So as you were talking about organizational vision, I'm sitting here looking at a desk covered with all these new projects, because I've been here 4 weeks. And as I'm turning over rocks, I'm starting to find, well, that's a problem and I got to fix that. And here's this thing that's coming up on a short deadline. And, I have 2 PDs this week I have to plan. And as I'm going through and assessing all these jobs, I realize that I'm prioritizing them based on a less than explicit value system. I'm using my own values, but then I'm guessing what the organizational values are based upon the problems that are on my desk. I'm kind of trying to guess what is the organization value based upon, well, here's what they've handed me in the first month to do. What's most important amongst them? Well, let's look at what they are. And these are kind of, so I'm guessing at what the values are. And it made me think, especially as I was listening to what Catherine said, I have to go talk to somebody and find out what the organizational values are and get a clear handle on what do we value and what's most important to us, because that's going to determine for me how I attack my work for the next year. And we haven't really had, we've had some casual conversations about it, but I haven't really had a clear discussion of where do you want me to go? I got dropped in here 2 weeks before the school year started. It was like, okay, have at it. And I was like, fine, fighting fires and moving papers. And now I'm to the point where I need to start making decisions. And I need that values discussion. What's important to us as an organization? I'm not sure anybody really knows, but we're going to start talking about it.
Right, that's going to be a great conversation, because I bet it's not one that they've ever really articulated. I bet they've never put words to what their values are. Do you think that, okay, I love her word rumble. Do you think that they'll dive in and deal with it, or do you think they'll take your values and absorb them as their own? Like, do you think they'll be suggestive and say, hey, you have a really good handle on this. Why don't we just go with whatever your direction is? Being, you're a leader. What do you think is going to happen?
I think from the top, from the upper management, I think they'll have at least some thoughts and some input. I think it'll be a hybrid of this is what we've done, and it'll be less about this is what we find value, and it'll be more about this is what troubles us.
Okay.
So I think it'll be a moving away from what troubles us, take us in a different direction. I think for my subordinates with whom we have to have the very same conversation, I think it's going to take a while before we get to what do you value? I think in the beginning, it's going to be, here's what we don't like. And here's what we used to have. And we're going to have to rumble with it for some time. And it's going to be multiple meetings. I think there's also a trust that goes along with it, because they don't know me.
Right.
I have 50 teachers working for me, and they've all met me once or twice. So they have a lot to learn about me and who I am. I have 2 secretaries here who trust me implicitly now because we've been together for 4 weeks and they know what I want. But the rest of the department, it's going to take some time. I think we're going to spend a lot of time dancing around it before we finally get to an understanding. They're going to have to, I have to observe them. They have to learn who I am, and they have to see that they can trust me in that our visions, at least to some extent, coincide.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I wonder if the organizational vision for a lot of organizations really, do they put their money where their mouth is? I mean, we have these 3 words, student service solutions, but does that really show up in everything that we do? So I wonder how many organizations, even if they do have this beautifully written value system, or 2 words or whatever, probably not like Brené's company, right? So.
Yeah, that's a good thought.
Anybody else have any thoughts on the? I mean, we can delve into what your values were if you want, what you consider to be your top 2 values, or not. It's all up to you with your comfort level. I know Ginny talked about creativity and legacy, and I talked a little bit about creativity and growth. I didn't get into the details of it, so I can talk some more because I hardly ever talk on these calls. But for me, the creativity, and although you would think, I'm in the arts and that's where the creativity comes from, but really for me, the creativity comes more from moving things ahead, more in creative problem solving and finding creative ways to approach instruction in the classroom. It's not about, it is about stimulating creativity, but it's more about how do I show teachers and create a path for teachers to find creativity in their students. So I'm creating ways to help support teachers to support creativity. So it's kind of like creativity twice removed from the process. I'm not looking to, compose great works of art and compose great symphonies and spectacular performances. I'm looking to help other people do that kind of thing. And the creativity for me is everybody is a little bit different. They bring a different set of skills. They're working with different age levels, I had a teacher in today who was working with self-contained autism classes for students with autism. Her take and her needs are completely different than my ninth grade band director who was in 2 hours earlier. So being able to give each one of them something that's going to help them to move forward is important for me.
I can see how, okay, you can have one of your values is creativity, but I can see how that's not necessarily something you don't have to be creating all the time. You're inspiring creativity, or you're facilitating creativity, but that's the path that you would like people around you to know that drives you, the cause of creativity, rather than just being creative. I think that's clear. I have my second one, risk taking. I'm not all about, I mean, I am. I'm not constantly taking risks. I'd be dead by now. But I am encouraging, I want to inspire people to take risks. And my teachers born in the 60s who are 30, 35 years into their teaching career, their risk, what looks like a risk to them, is something else completely for a 30-year-old teacher who's walking into the classroom for a first time. But just to inspire them to be risk takers and to take a chance and move outside their comfort zone. That to me is why one of my values is risk taking, because it's not something I necessarily always do, but I want to inspire that as well. Does it make sense? Is that okay?
Makes sense to me.
Well, that's like one of mine is financial stability, both at home and then just sitting here listening to y'all. I do that for my teachers too, because I have a lot of new teachers, especially in our district. The first year teachers in our district didn't get a paycheck until September 15th. So they went the whole month of August and half of the month of September without a paycheck. And so part of my financial responsibility for them is I don't introduce apps or things that I want them to try out in their classroom that cost. I try very hard to stay with the free ones.
That's tough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's some good free ones.
But that's also that's also great that you consider that. Now let me ask you this: do you say that explicitly to them? Do you tell them I'm making sure that everything is?
I don't say it explicitly, but I will put a note if it does cost, and make sure that they understand. And I try and do anything with a minimal cost, because I remember what it was like the first couple of years teaching. I mean, I was broke, and so when somebody would say, "Oh, well, you just got to pay $20 a year or $30 a year for that," and I would be like, "And?"
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting how that becomes important. Money's not important until you don't have any, and then it is.
Yeah.
I remember in college, I went to school 4 years late, so I was working for 4 years and then went away to college. And before I left for school, I never worried about money. I had enough coming in. I wasn't really paying much in rent, and then I went away to school, and having $5 on a Friday was like winning the lotto. I can eat today. I don't have to go to the dining hall. I can order pizza or something. Back when I went to school, $5 would buy pizza. So it was back in the old days.
That's back when $20 would fill up your car with gas too.
Oh yeah. $20, I could barely pull it to the gas station.
I can remember when I first got a job, and I was commuting. I could put 2 tanks of gas in my car and still have $5 for a lunch out for $20.
Wow.
So yeah.
All right, now Emily, you mentioned grace as one of your values. Can you tell us a little bit more about why grace?
Grace for me and grace for the teachers. Everybody needs forgiveness, and that, I try really hard not to jump to conclusions as to why somebody is or isn't listening to me, or isn't trying something I've showed them. And I'm just trying to give them that grace and really dig in and find out what the real reason is.
What do you think the reactions are like to that? Are people, do you think people by and large have a better reaction to you or a better connection with you than maybe some of your less graceful, not colleagues, but other less graceful individuals in the field? Chris.
Christy's one of my
Christy's close to
favorites,
me.
but I can tell you some of my other secondary coaches, when we do group trainings, for the district, and they never know who they're going to get. I have several of my team that'll come back and go, yeah, but you weren't leading it. I didn't understand what she said because you weren't leading it. So I guess that is something.
Okay, well, that's good to know. All right, does anybody else want to speak to the values that they've selected? Because that was kind of the first step of the process, was naming the values.
Well, for me, mine were service and connections. And I kind of took my list, which same thing, I ended up with like 12 to start. And then I kind of start looking at them and grouping them kind of the way she talks about. And that's kind of how I came up with service and connections. And, and for me, I've lived a lot of different places, and, and now I serve, 175 staff members at 3 different campuses. And, so for me, being able to make those quick connections and, and start building those relationships is really important for me at work. And for me also as an adult, I've lived, in 4 different time zones in the continental U.S., and I've lived in Europe and Asia. So I've lived in a lot of different environments, and, really kind of needed to reach out and make some connections to, to be able to adapt and live in those environments over the years. So those have been things that have been really important for me, both personally and professionally. And I think I just tend to be very service oriented. So like, as a coach for my teachers, I'm really, trying to be resourceful, but, also be respectful of whatever they're going through and what stress they have. And I really focus, with them that I'm there to support them and provide a service for them. So whatever's going to take stress, off of them at that time, whether it maybe be actual technology integration or something else that they need more importantly, like I do my best to kind of step in and provide those levels of support for them. So for me, service is a big priority. And especially like these last 2 years now that I'm split between 3 campuses, finding other ways to just be accessible and still be able to provide a high level of service and make them feel like they're supported, even when I can't physically be there, whether it be through video chat or, Hangouts chat or whatever it is that they need to be able to reach me, but still giving them that feeling that they can still touch base with me, even if they can't, physically see me or come to my office. So, so I think for me, those are my 2, and there's a lot of reasons, but it does all tie together in my life.
So Brené's next step in living into our values is taking the values from BS to behavior, which I like that. I really like that a lot. Some of the ways she phrases things, and I mean, I know she has people who work with her who probably help her to codify all these things, but she says them in ways that you're like, I could get behind that, and I would feel comfortable telling that to a group of people if I was sharing that. So the whole idea of turning these behaviors into, turning these values into behaviors. One of the things that I struggled with as I was looking at this was the slippery behaviors outside of the value, like the things that you could do that kind of take you off the task of living your values. I guess the easy path that you can follow, that's not the challenge, and and how do we do that? So as I'm looking at it, the whole idea of creativity, one of the things that you struggle with, and I'm going to see a lot of in the coming year, is inertia. Is we've been doing it like this for a long time and it's been successful. Success is, how are we judging success? We get to go home at the end of the day. That may be your level of success, but are we demonstrating growth? Are we moving forward? Are we doing things that meet the needs of our current students, or are we doing things that met the needs of students 10 years ago when we created this initial plan and we just keep churning it out year after year? So, I mean, that inertia, and accepting inertia is one of those kind of slippery behaviors for me that take away from the value. So as you were looking at these, did you come up against any things that you were thinking, wow, that affects me that's one of the things that I constantly have to be against or fight against in order to live my values?
Yeah, we have we have hours that we work. We have we work from 7 to 2 or 7:30 to 8, and it seems like those hours don't necessarily service the people that we're trying to help out. We're trying to bring things to teachers who are basically in the classrooms from 7:30 to 2 or 2:30, and so colleagues who want to work just their hours and train people during those hours aren't really serving our customers. Our customers need people to work before school and after school and on weekends, and so I find that's so the structure of our job is wonky. Like, I want to be with the teachers and with their students in front of them, not just typing around and sending them an email and sending a quick video suggestion. I need to be with them. So we need to modify that. And usually I can do that, but sometimes the powers that be say, you can't have your meetings at Starbucks. I'm like, but that's where I'm going to meet people. It's literally happened this summer. I'm just not going to tell them next time that's what I'm doing, because that's where I would have had more people drop in for help and suggestions and little mini PDs and whatnot. It would have been great, but they didn't want that. So yeah, we're not always serving people. We're not always thinking of our people's schedules when we serve them. Kind of in the same way that I don't understand why the tweet meets are at 10 o'clock on Pacific Standard Time. I don't think we're reaching educators in the classroom when we have those at 2 o'clock. I don't think we're serving our people, but that's a different problem. Sorry, I never understood that.
Wait, they're at 10 a.m., right?
10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Yeah. So they hit me at like, what is that? Is that noon? Is that 1 o'clock? I don't know. I'm never there.
I can never go because I'm working, and my teachers, the people that most need to see that, are not going to be on a tweet meet when they've got 35 10-year-olds in front of them. It's just not going to happen. So I don't think that's serving our people.
Right. So we've created a structure that's almost antithetical to service in some ways.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, so that's always been a concern. So I am 2, maybe 3 years from retiring, and I find I don't really give a darn very much anymore. So it's a lot easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, and that's the risk taking.
But it's not that you don't give a darn. You're no longer right. You give a darn about service and less of a darn about the repercussions of going outside the structure.
Right, exactly. And I've never been more satisfied with my choices. Like, I feel more comfortable with my choices because I'm doing what I need and want and was hired to do, despite the structural constraints.
Right.
Those are my goals, is to do what you just said.
Retire?
And I don't know. I have a long way to go, but I'm just at a point where I guess I have the courage to speak up and say what I want, and willing to make change, even if it means, pushing against the waves. I'm just at a point where I'm comfortable enough where I am. And like what you said, I've kind of taken up the motto where it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. So
yeah.
Kind of where I'm going.
Yeah, I think some people are just afraid to say anything because, why rattle the cage? It's been working for 20 years, but has it been working? Well, like what Vinny was saying, it hasn't really been working, and we have a different audience now, and we have different things to sell. So, be creative. Oh, creative. That's Vinny's thing.
I liked her quote on 193 about the 8 seconds because there's times that I'm like, oh, well, that will make me uncomfortable. But after listening to reading about the 8 seconds, I guess we can do anything for 8 seconds.
That's a good one. I know. I like that too.
I hadn't really thought about that until she mentioned it, but really it is true. I only in reflecting back on, what are the times where I've actually decided, what, the heck with it, I'm just going to deal with it. And really it probably is only about 8 seconds where you're like, God, I'm so sorry. I should have been here sooner, or I should have been here to help you with that. What can I do now? and once you get over that, even the anguish, I really needed you. Okay, here I am. Let's let's move forward from here. She's right. It's probably all of 8 seconds. It's tough though, because that's a big risk, because you're afraid that it's going to be painful for a long time, and you don't want that. Nobody wants that. I took issue with her Leonard Cohen quote because it's not Leonard Cohen. She quoted Leonard Cohen in Hallelujah. It's actually Jeff Buckley. Leonard Cohen doesn't have those words. I was like, I know that song by heart. Those words aren't in there. It's been recorded like 3 or 4 different times. That's the Jeff Buckley version. Love is not a victory march. It's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. That was just me. That's the music teacher in me. Sorry. Couldn't let it go.
This is jumping ahead a little bit, but I really liked her reflective question, and this is on page 215 where she's talking about positive intent. And she says, write down the name of someone who fills you with frustration and disappointment, and then propose the idea that that person is doing the best they can. And then thinking about, if I choose kindness as my value, then maybe I need to choose grace as well, because thinking about, I guess I have whined about people too much lately and really have been living outside. So this is my slippery slope here. So living outside my value with this kindness, and it's like, no, don't complain about this person. They're doing the best they can. No one is in this profession who wants to, harm the teachers or so. So that gave me some pause to think and reflect and consider, my value. Like I said, if I choose kindness as mine. So.
All right. I want to let you off the hook a little bit here. I'm going to ask a general question for everybody. How many of us have talked about people instead of talking to them?
Yes.
Yeah. So and as I was reading, I was like, oh, damn, I do that. And I know I do that. And I got to stop doing that. And unfortunately, it's often with people with whom you should not have the conversation. That's the worst part is, and generally for me, that's everybody, because I'm a supervisor. I'm not supposed to have those discussions with everybody. But sometimes the frustration is just like, and, and I say things and then I think, I shouldn't have said that. I have to dial that back. And, instead of, and of course, then you're thinking, well, they must think that I trust that I trust them and to be candid about something like that. But then the flip side of it is, are they thinking, yeah, but what does he say about me when I'm not there? Mm-hmm. And but we all do it. And it's exactly the kind of thing that we should stop doing. We need to talk to people, not about them. Mm-hmm.
I love the quote on 216 of after you've, been frustrated by a person and they're doing their absolute best, well, then you need to move the rock. Because when I first got an education, my sister-in-law said I was in the wrong bus seat, and I'm finally in my correct bus seat. So I was a rock that needed to be moved. Mm-hmm.
A former teacher of mine, I just heard from one of my colleagues in the previous district. She said, well, now that you're not his boss, I can tell you he doesn't like teaching and he doesn't know what he wants to do, but he's probably not going to stick around. And I thought he was pretty good, but apparently he hates it. But nobody would tell me. Mm-hmm. And I wish he had come to me and said something, because we might have been able to help. We might have been able to do something, but I never thought to ask him if he was happy, because I never saw any indication of the contrary. Mm-hmm. And, now we might lose somebody who's good if we just found a different place to put him. We might have been able to deal with it, but it's that communication is so hard. And you're right. You have to put people in the right place. And sometimes they don't belong where they are.
I walked out of a district similar. I just happened to walk into another district in a closer to the right bus seat.
Wow, that had to be hard.
It was. I gave notice at, spring break time, when everybody else gives notice when you're leaving. And I'm like walking out going, I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I can't do this anymore. And I was fortunate. I was in the hill country of Texas. And so there's a lot of little districts where I didn't have to move, but I could switch districts. And another district opened up a spot. I was able to move.
Wow. That's extraordinary, especially for someone who has financial stability as one of their values.
Right. Yes. To quit a job without having something, that was a first for me, to quit a job with no plan. I mean, my only plan was there was an HEB in town, to go to HEB. Yeah, that was my plan if I couldn't find another teaching job.
Well, you had a plan. So what did we think about the whole section on the feedback checklist? Well, I'm sorry, before we get into that, one of the things that she talked about was the feeling. Before we get into that, I did want to talk about the how it feels when you're living into your values as opposed to how it feels when you're not living into your values. And it's very interesting because of what she did say was, when we're living into our values, it would be easy. But she says it's actually not. It's hard, because that's when we know we're making some of the hardest decisions. She says, I wish doing the right thing was the easy thing, but it rarely is, which is kind of interesting, because just think about the weight of that word. It's no problem. The weight of those words, doing the hard thing. I wish doing the right thing is the easy thing, but it rarely is. Think of what that means for most of us, that doing the right thing is the hard thing to do. That's a daily battle for everybody who's working. Are you feeling the same kind of thing when you're trying to live into your values, when you're trying to work into your values? Are you finding that often, or at least somewhat frequently, it's a challenge? You're muted, Kim.
Because I got a call and I got to go in a minute. I'm so sorry.
That's
but I
okay.
think that status quo thing is just so hard. And there's so many unimaginative people that don't think anything needs to be changed. And it just means more work. And they don't take any pride or joy out of making things better. But I don't know. Status quo is the toughest rock to move. Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Has it been 20 minutes already?
I know. Right? I'm sorry. I have to go. That was a bad phone call. So I have to go.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I hope everything is okay.
Yeah, it's fine. It's going to be fine.
All right. You know what? You're not the first person to have to leave a call early, Kim. So it's okay. It was great to see you.
Great to see you. I'll see you at 4.
And we'll see you in a couple of, 4. That's 7 for me.
Right. Okay. Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll see you in a little while. And
right,
hopefully we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
And nice to meet everybody.
Yeah. Bye, Kim.
All right. So living into our values and feedback. Staying in line with our values when giving and receiving feedback. Challenges for people. Well, how many of you give feedback as part of your work?
What page are you on?
I'm sorry, I'm on 198. So this was the whole section. She brought it forth from Daring Greatly from one of our other books. But the whole idea of feedback, I know I'm ready to give feedback when I'm ready to sit next to you rather than across from you. How many of you get feedback as part of your work? Okay. Kind of. It for some of you, it might not be as formalized as like what I do sitting in an office giving an evaluation. But, we're giving feedback in some ways, I would imagine, even if it's instructional feedback. But did anyone have any feedback on the section on feedback?
Well, like I said, when we started, I thought this was just brilliant because the other books that I've read and the other things that we've tried as the organization, they were just not as clear, or they didn't speak to me as much as these did. But the thing about this is both of our responsibilities, like putting that feedback in between us, not just in front of you. And I've highlighted almost every one of those statements. I think I want to print this paper out and make a poster. And one other thing is, in my previous role, I did have to give feedback a lot, and I worked with teachers in need of assistance. And now I'm not doing that. And so I have really lost the skills. I mean, it takes a lot of work and practice to get that feedback mojo, I think. And I think having to give a little bit of feedback right now to colleagues that's why it's so hard for me. And that's why this book is so helpful, because I have completely lost my skills. I've lost my touch of everything that I've been practicing in my previous role. So.
It really is something that you develop a comfort level for.
Mm-hmm.
And you get, I think in the beginning, you get kind of a tool bag where, you know, you learn, you know, I have this tool and I have this tool and I have this tool, and then gradually you learn how to use more tools. But I think it is really a growth thing. Ginny, this is where like a lot of your research is, isn't it? Or to some extent.
Yeah, a little bit. But I love this section because this was like, you know, a lot of my job is feedback. I mean, we go in and we don't evaluate. It's all feedback to help them grow and improve. And it is difficult sometimes. And sometimes you want to be, and this is why, like right off the bat in the very beginning, that whole thing about clarity is kind was really good for me to hear early on, because then when you get into feedback, that's what's so hard is you think that not giving feedback is sometimes, when it's a really difficult situation, is better because you don't want to be like unkind to them. But the whole clarity is kind, like starting with that and then getting into this section later in the book about feedback was just really, it was really good. So, and this is all the things that we've learned, you know, when you're ready to sit next to you rather than across from you, that's what a coach does. We sit next to the person, we work with them, and making sure that people understand that. And then, you know, we work with them on the problem. It's not, you have a problem, here, fix it. It's, we work together and I'm going to support you and trying to figure out how to help you, you know, move forward with it. And we'll move forward together. So this whole section was really, really good.
And the whole idea that I don't know everything, I'm going to come in and listen to you and we'll create a solution together, rather than I have 3 solutions I brought with me. Here's this one, you'll try that. That's not what I very
rarely have the solution in mind. And I keep telling them that because some people do look for that. They want the magic answer. And I tell them right off the bat that I don't have a magic answer for you, but I'm going to help you work through it. So, yeah.
I don't want to be coached. I want to be told. Some people really want to be told. They don't want to be a part of it. They want, you know, tell me what to do.
That's that compliance versus wanting to actually grow and improve. They just want to be compliant. So just tell me what to do and I'll do it. But they're not really looking to grow and improve. They just want to be compliant.
Is this going to be on the test? Tell me what I need to get a 70.
Yep.
I was stunned by, I won't say stunned, but I was taken by the number of facets she had for readiness for feedback. Mm-hmm. You know, I was thinking 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, the fact that she got to 10, that they're, and each one of them is kind of, you know, stands on its own. They all have facets that are really unique. It's not as if it's 4 that were fleshed out to 10. It really is, you know, it really is 10. You know, the idea of being able to thank someone for their efforts instead of just criticizing them. For, you know, the idea of being able to find the positive in the whole thing, mm-hmm. and owning your part of it. You know, each one of these things is so important. And I think, and I know it makes the listener more ready to accept the feedback when they feel like it's not being foisted on them, but to get, we have an issue and we need to address it. And you've brought some wonderful things to the table, and together I think we can make the changes. I like the whole, that philosophy on it, that thought that It's not, here's what you're doing that's wrong and I need you to fix it, but it's more like, we have a need that we're not meeting here and we need to find a way to deal with it. I mean, some of it, you know, the way they phrase it is organizational, but I don't think it's that challenging to turn it around and make it instructional.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and I mean the first, when I grabbed this, I don't forget what it says, but you know, when I work with new teachers, like the first thing that I tell them is, we're going to ask you some questions. We're not going to come in and tell you things. So that first question is, how do you know your students are learning? And they have to come up with it. So despite what I saw, it doesn't matter what I saw really. It's more about it really causes them to think. And then I start with what they are observing and what they deem as an issue. And then we ask them, what did you do to cause that? So this is my own Rumble conversation right here. So what did you do to cause that? And then they have to really think about what they're doing that actually causes that student learning. And then what could you do? And after each one, it's, and what else? And what else? And what else? So the teacher really has to come to the conclusion of what they want to work on, how they want to work on it, and then we're there to support them to do it.
I like those questions. I want to steal them.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to start showing up in all of my evaluations.
Yep. Well, that's what our principals were like, oh my goodness. And so I made them little cards so that they had it with them. What do my principals
Are you willing to share?
Yeah, I can share.
Yeah, we're gonna have to put those cards up in the Wakelet so that people can
Okay.
people can borrow them.
Definitely.
I liked very much. I'm sorry, Christy. Did you have something you want to say?
Yeah. I'm good.
Oh, okay. I liked her kind of mantra on 203 for receiving feedback, because I've been telling my teachers the new director shine is on me right now, because I've been in the job for 4 weeks. So I still have the opportunity to be dumb about things. So let's capitalize on that. But at some point, that shine's going to wear off, and I'm going to start being held accountable for things, and I'm going to start hearing feedback. So I liked her mantras, the idea of, I'm brave enough to listen. There's something valuable here, and this is the path to mastery. The 3 things that she repeats to herself, because I think it's important, because the first thing you do is, at going all the way back to the beginning, is you armor up. People are giving you feedback, and the first thing I have to, I feel attacked, so I'm going to stop listening to you. And the whole idea of, I'm brave enough to listen, I can sort through my own emotions and any anger and emotion that's coming from the far side, and get to what is the core of this feedback here? What is it that I'm hearing, and how can I use this to move forward, to grow? That's hard. So I liked her 3 mantra here, because I think they're all really important. Take what works and leave the rest. Those kinds of things were good for me. I also like the case study from Myovision, their review system, the one that they built, all research driven and survey driven and everything, and they built a review system which ended up being completely unsuccessful. And it just made me wishful, because with Race to the Top, we've created all of these evaluation systems for educators that have done little, in my opinion, to improve the profession, and just created a barrier between supervisors and educators. I think we've created systems that have actually made the field worse in trying to implement them, and not given us the opportunity to be innovative. Exactly the kinds of things that Kim was talking about. Why do we have to have things only during these hours? And the things that Jenny was talking about, how are you measuring the success of your children? How do you know when they've learned something? Well, according to Race to the Top, we must have a test that shows that they've learned the things that we say they learned. But that's not how, some, children of certain ages should be evaluated. We're certainly shouldn't be evaluating first and second graders that way. And yet, lo and behold, we've created a system that virtually requires us to do it. So as I was looking at that, and I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if we could just start again and talk to teachers and say, hey, how do you think it would work? What do you think the best system would be for us to move ahead, and create 1,000 different systems and find the one that works the best for your organization and for your teachers? I would love that. That was just me editorializing.
I just like that. I mean, they actually took time to realize that it wasn't working, for them, and we're actually open to making change, because I feel like that's where the stumbling block is. It's like these systems are always set up, but when they don't work, no one's willing to do anything about it, and that's, I think, the piece that always frustrates me, so that's why my 12-year-old is like wanting to have a petition against standardized testing, and because she says it's a waste of her time because she already, so, I feel like if a child can see it so clearly, how comes we're not willing to acknowledge it and work towards change? I think
good for her.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, you're fine. Okay. So
One other piece that I liked was the, I guess, sentence starters on page 204, the script that she provided when she said if she's getting a lot of feedback and it's overload, she said, I'm overloaded right now. So if you can pick one of these and dig into it, and then we'll come back to talk about the other issues, but I can only hear so much right now. And just thinking about, I worked with new teachers for so long that little structure would have been so good for the new teachers, thinking about there's just so much to do. What's the priority? Kind of help them think about what's the one thing I need to dig into, and I'll come back to these others, but just help me decide that part. So that was another thing that stood out for me.
Have you ever tried using any of those?
Not yet.
I have trouble processing things, auditory processing. It's something I've lived with for a long time. So it's not uncommon for me to get that overload where it's just like, I'm sorry, it's too much information. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And it really is very dependent upon who the other person is in the conversation. But when you say, hang on, that's a lot for me right now. So can we just kind of focus on this one thing? And I've had varying levels of success, everything from sure, let's do that, to I'll come back later, to just people storming out. So it's very interesting how I think the confidence of the other person and the security of the other person in their own, in themselves and in what they're talking about, I think that has a lot to do with how that's accepted. But I did like that. I did like that thing because that's exactly her whole, I get it. And I say that when it's just too much information coming in and I've stopped listening. And I even found it today in a pre-observation conference that went more than a half an hour. And about a half an hour is sometimes about all of the attention that I have. I had, so it was a half an hour where she was just talking the whole time. And it was all great stuff, but it was just too much all at once. And we got to the half an hour mark and I was like, all right, I have enough, so I don't need to, I have all the information I need, so I'm not going to put a stop to it. But my first inclination was to say, hang on, this is a lot of information for me right now. But it was the wrong time to do it. So I just let it go. But I was long ago not engaged in the conversation because it was too much.
Well, and one of the department heads I used to work with, she just had the face that I could tell, it's too much. And so, and she was like that with technology. Catherine, that's too much. And, I could just see that. And, if they don't have that facial expression, I think this is just another tool or suggestion. let me know if it's too much, or tell someone when it's too much. And then that kind of feedback and showing, yes, this is great, we'll come back to it later. So
I tend to approach my new teachers with I kind of front load that. You know, I'm going to show you some things, but tell me when to stop. I know you're overloaded, or I'll come back in September. You don't need this until, 3 weeks into the school year.
mm-hmm.
That's a good idea. Giving them leave to say, no mas.
Mm-hmm.
I realize before the next meeting, I have to move that thing that's behind me because it looks like I'm wearing a crown of some sort. and I noticed it about halfway through, and I was like, I could get up and move that thing, or I could just live with the fact that it looks like I'm wearing it on my head. So, or I could wear my marching band hat over there. So that's actually a bunch of sheet music all made into a giant flower. Okay. Does anybody else have anything that they want to add here?
No, I don't think.
The next section is kind of short. It's part 3, Braving Trust, and then so we only have two more meetings left on this. We have part 3, Braving Trust, and then part 4, Learning to Rise. But Learning to Rise is actually it's also got all the acknowledgments in there. So I mean, that's not so much going to be the
Not as long
acknowledgments.
as it looks.
Right? Yeah, it's actually 30 pages. So we have the next section is actually not long at all. The next section is actually like 18 pages. But I think what we'll probably do is we'll probably delve into the notebook, into the Dare to Lead notebook, and see if there are some activities that we can bring out of that for our next sharing session. And then we're coming to the end. So it's getting to be time to pick another book if we want to pick another book, or if you want to just quietly bail out of the group, that's fine too. So if nobody's got anything else to add, I'm going to end the recording, and then we'll be calling it a day.
Okay.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
good.
All right,
Thank you.
cool.
See you in 2 weeks.
It was great to see everybody. See you in a couple of weeks.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
All right, bye.